And welcome back, everyone. This is Sharon Alexander with Alexander Arts. Last week's mashup didn't go too badly, fortunately, so here we are again with the bookmarks. As you can see, I haven't changed a thing, but we're going to this time. We're doing backgrounds. I'm declaring those done. We're going to work more on the backgrounds here probably, and maybe some on the petals. And I probably will have to go back and do some of these lines back in again just so I can see what I'm doing. So, let's get started. Another hour of watching me paint. Whoever said that watching paint dry couldn't be exciting, right? Alright, so we're doing these. I think that a darker background might be nice. Maybe something in a blue, or maybe that Payne's gray. So I'm going to get my little water bottle, my little spray bottle, because that's my older and cheaper paint there. I think it was Royal and Lankle, and I didn't know the little trick about adding glycerin to the cheaper watercolors when I made the pans over here, so they're a little harder to reuse. But we'll get that soaking there. And I remembered, I had to go look it up again, but I remembered the technique I was talking about where we go over this color with the same color and make it darker and darker for different levels. It's called negative painting. That's what it is. It's negative painting. And I should have brought a pencil over here. Hold on. Let me grab one of my watercolor pencils. Because I like... use this one. This one's good enough. What does Arteza call this one? Arteza calls this emerald. Good enough. Because I want to just sort of outline a little bit. Let's put some leaves in here. Hibiscus leaves are not terribly complicated, but I always like having an idea where my edges should be so that I can leave that negative space where these leaves should be. And I'm just going to pick a few places, stick a few shapes, and we're going to fill in everything around those drawings I just did with a darker color. And I think I mentioned last time that I am basically cleaning up my egg palette. And in case anyone doesn't know, this is the egg palette. I found this at Kroger's on sale for $8 one time, and I wish I had grabbed two of them. These are great. They're ceramic. And if I get all the rest of this older paint cleaned off, this is just a mix-up of old paints I wasn't as thrilled with, and it'll probably get used for more bookmarks like these, just to use them up. Who knows? Maybe I'll even use them on those hibiscuses, just to use them up. Since this isn't some grand thing that's going to go on a gallery wall or even a friend's wall. But I have some phthalo green on there. I think we'll use that. So give me that thing, because by the point I did the egg dish, I did know that I could add vegetable glycerin to the cheaper watercolors like this, and it would allow me to reactivate old and cheaper paints like this, because cheap paints dry rock hard and they tend to crumble. And if you're not sure what I mean by that, have a look at this. I've added quite a bit of glycerin to this, and I think there may be two different cheaper brands because I was gifted a couple of old sets. And you can see this is all broken up. This is almost as hard as the plate itself. And when I use this, you'll probably see a lot of little granular bits and pieces that will show up on the painting. Again, because this was cheaper paint and it just doesn't reactivate as well. Hopefully I've gammered just enough that I can take a brush and start using that paint. And I think I'm going to go with a synthetic so that it doesn't flare out on me while I'm working. This may be a little small. Let me go up to the other one I've got here. This is a 12. This is a master's touch. I haven't been as happy with these. They tend to wear out and get really soft and flaky really fast on me. It could just be the way I use them. If you really like these, cheers to you. Go right ahead. but I'm not as fond of them. But it's the only one I've got right now that's larger with that nice, at least for right now, tip. I will probably replace it with one of the Princtons when I'm done with this brush. Usually on a bigger brush I go for the natural brush, squirrel hair, goat hair, something like that. But I need this to stay precise. I've got a lot of thin lines here, and you didn't see it, but I went back just before this started and tried to put this horrible paint back down, and it's already trying to come up again. So there's no telling how well this will work, but I want this to look kind of like these mushrooms are, whatever surface they're growing on, probably a tree stump or something, and I want it to be dark, and that's getting in my way, so let's switch to the other hand. May not be quite as precise, but hey, this isn't a gallery piece, so not going to worry about it. Maybe someday I'll do gallery pieces and I'll worry about it, but today is not that day. Today is not that day. Whew. And for everybody who knows where I am and what kind of week this has been, how have you been? It has been swelteringly hot this week. One of the reasons why I am running a little late on painting this week is because it was so stinking hot. This room gets really kind of hot. Looks like it should have a little bit of a space here, and this is the nice thing about darker colors. They go right on top of lighter colors really easily. Still shows through a little bit. You can still kind of see that yellow glow behind that, but it's okay. We're just playing. Just playing here. But who knows, maybe later in the future I will like this idea enough to incorporate this color this color scheme and these mushrooms into something more elaborately built. Who knows? You never know what I'll come up with. So it's been so hot this week that either I had an allergic reaction to grass touching my legs, or I had steam scald from the grass I was sitting on while I put together a garden wagon to help me out around the yard this summer and fall and for the next few years until it dies. Yeah, the whole front of my calves where they were touching the grass looked like they'd been steam scalded. It was crazy. Not specifically painful, just something unusual. Something I'd certainly never seen before. Yeah, you can tell the difference now between this space and this space. I went back to pick up more paint, and the water has gotten into that paint just a little bit more, and so now it's darker. Fortunately, this is watercolor. It's meant to be layered, so I will just add some more layers until I get the even coloring I'm looking for. Since I'm doing this as a dark, it probably will be a bit. Ooh, and now I'm thinking I probably should have brought some salt. I could have put some salt on this, and we could have had kind of a de facto starry night sky going on up there. Who knows? Maybe I'll pause the video for a moment and run up and get some salt, because I don't think I've got salt back here. Probably should have salt back here for those spontaneous ideas that crop into my head. After all, that's what this whole thing is about, right? Spontaneously painting whatever pops into my head for everybody to watch me do. More. You're probably wondering why I'm leaving these big spaces up here and just going for these little ones. A couple of reasons. Putting my hand on there so I protect my work. One, because I want to get these little fiddly pieces out of my way. Two, because when I get to the top part, I'm probably going to turn it upside down again, so that I can get into all those spaces without having my arm in your way and mine. But you see how this is working? This has got that nice tip, and it's, even though it's a bigger brush, it is getting into these little spaces just fine, because big brushes hold big waters, which also in turn allow me to keep on putting paint on the page that much longer. Sort of like using a big pen as opposed to a little pen if you're, say, using, oh gosh, what is it? What is it? Favorite pen? Sharpies? Sharpies tend to have big barrels for their big pens. Of course, usually they have fat tips, but if they had thin tips, they would still be putting out that thin tip and just have that much more ink in them. Probably why they don't sell them that way, because they don't want people to be able to just keep on rolling. They want you to run out, so you have to come buy more. You see that? I put that darker mark there. Got impatient and put a dark mark there before really putting it on the page, and now I got to smooth it out. Smoothing. Smooth it out. How do you like this synth wave I found? I know a lot of artists like to put on classical music, piano. I live on coffee and synthwave. I put on some retro swing, but I haven't found any that isn't copyrighted yet. So, synthwave. Apparently you can do synthwave in a copyright-free situation. Isn't that nice? Let's stay awake. Stay awake and paint. And I've gone quiet. Hopefully the music is enjoyable. Because I really haven't done much this week. It's just been too hot to do anything this week. Absolutely too hot to do anything this week. I've watched other people paint. I've answered questions on a painting forum. But as far as actual doing anything, nah, it's too hot. It was 100 degrees in the shade the other day. It was too hot. I worked on that wagon for about an hour and I didn't even finish it. I managed to get the undercarriage put together and I didn't even get quite to putting the wheels on it. And I'm like, nope, I'm done. I'm going in. I'm completely soaked, and it's not because I've poured water on myself to stay cool. I am soaked. I'm going in. And then, of course, I sat down in my chair, and I zombified for an hour, and I agreed with myself that, yep, it's too hot. Stay in here. Drink this glass of tea you just got. So I keep mint tea in the fridge, specifically for cooling down when I've gotten too hot. Ooh, that is a lot darker. A lot closer to the color I really want to. So, like I said, I will be going over this, at least in places, with multiple layers, most likely. And of course, as I come down here, I run out of paint on the brush itself, so it starts to get lighter, which, for the case of lighting, doesn't work. This is behind the mushrooms, supposedly, and we haven't added anything in the back that would cause shadows. On the top, we don't have uplighting or anything like that, so it should be darker at the bottom. But that's okay. Lighter with watercolors can always be fixed. Sometimes doing darker is possible, but not as easy. So if it's lighter, we can always go back and fix it. So that's okay. I bet this is going to be darker because I just went and gotten more paint. Yep. Darker because I just got more paint. Now this color I'm using only calls itself Payne's Gray. It's got a very nice blue tint to it. So when I replace this, it'll probably be with the Daniel Smith version. So probably their Payne's Gray Blue. Because there's another version that's a lot warmer and a lot more gray as opposed to blue. That makes a lot more sense, because this is still considered a gray, but it is a very blue gray. In fact, I often change between this and indigo because I actually find indigo to be a lot more gray than blue. Maybe that doesn't really make a lot of sense, but if I did the swatches side by side, I think it would. I think indigo has maybe a touch of green to it, maybe? I don't know. At least the one I have does. The indigo I have currently is the Arteza's version, and I do use it almost as much as I use this Payne's Gray Blue. Get up under that shroom cap. There we go. And moving upwards. And now I'm going to turn it upside down for my ease and yours. Try not to get any of that dark blue paint onto the green background on the other one. And get us some more panes. There we go. The whole point of watching me paint is being able to see me paint, right? So let's fix that out. So how do we keep from having hard edges in the middle of a large space? Keep it moving. Keep it wet. Because if those edges dry out, you will end up with hard edges even inside your paint. Sort of like when you're using markers and you run a marker over a mark you've already run, and you end up with double the line because you've now got twice the ink in the same spot. It's not always easy to use markers like that, although I've noticed that alcohol markers, good alcohol markers at least, don't do that. I was playing with some alcohol markers the other day, and you know, I have a cheap set that I bought to try out. What is it, Azure or something like that? I think it's by Lancel. It's whatever Walmart had, and I got to try it out. And very quickly decided that the colors I really like and use the most aren't there, so then I went out and bought a set that had a few more colors that I wanted. Actually, I think the set that I ended up getting was the Lancel. So what was the other one? Something called Azure. I don't know. But anyway, some of them had the nibs and some of them had the brush tips. I ended up with a few from Michael's. I ended up with a few of the ones that Hobby Lobby sells. And theirs, of course, have the brush tips. I'll admit, I do like those brush tips because you can feather out a coloring as opposed to the nibs where you stop, it stops, and it's not flexible. So wherever you stop is where it's going to stop. It doesn't feather. Maybe sometime if you guys are interested, comment on that. Tell me, do you want to see me do a little bit of alcohol marker work? I know that alcohol markers are extremely popular, or at least they have been. It's not been my preferred thing, but I do have all the stuff to do it, so I can show a little bit of that in a less manga setting than most people seem to like to use it for. I guess that's really what it was made for, sort of a faster version of doing manga, because traditionally mangas were done with gouache, as far as I understand from reading the history of it, because gouache was inexpensive, it was opaque, it was made with water, so it was quick, fast, easy, and you could pump out cartoons, or mangas as they called them, very quickly. The Japanese-styled, Korean-styled, Chinese-styled cartoons. Pump them out pretty easily back in the time before all of that was done digitally. And studios like Becklyyy, I think that's how that's pronounced. If it's not, you can abrade me in the comments later. I have to admit, they do some beautiful work. I'm not a fan of manga. It's not that I dislike it. It's just not something that has a huge draw for me. But I admit that I enjoy looking at their art style, especially their backgrounds. Their backgrounds are beautiful. Absolutely beautiful stuff. Kincaid, move over. These Becklyyy guys do beautiful backgrounds. Because even though they're very simple in the way that they are drawn, the way the colors are layered is very expressive. It's very colorful in most cases, and it shows a lot of detail without actually sitting there and using a micron and putting in a ton of actual detail. It suggests a lot of detail. It suggests shading, it suggests shape. And in some cases, it portrays movement very nicely, because you look at it and you're like, oh, that looks like a breezy day. Nothing is physically moving, but you get the feeling that it might be a breezy day. So kudos to the guys that work in the Ghibli studios, even if I can't pronounce your name, Ghibli, something like that. Beautiful work. And I'm sure all of my manga fan friends, whom I do have a few of, are probably just going nuts at my pronunciation and probably my ignorance of the actual cartoon, manga, whatever in general. Here we go. Now this is probably drying fast enough, and since I'm going over it with the same color in the same area, I probably could go over this and not wait. Let's see if I can even out this Payne's Gray background. I do go through a lot of this color, so it probably isn't going to take me very long before I can move on to the better one, because I do have a tube of Payne's Gray. I hope it will be close to the same as this. I think it's actually Winsor & Newton. If not, then I will probably end up having 2 pans of Payne's Gray, because it does, at least in the Dainayw set, come in 2 different shades. A blue shade and just, I think, regular Payne's Gray. And that doesn't bother me in the slightest, because it's nice having those options. A warm gray and a cool gray, or a blue gray, or a neutral gray. Because there are all kinds of shades of gray. Gray is not just faded out black, and even black. I know I've got that little little card I've showed before. Those Daniel Smith little dot cards. There's a zoazite, a black tourmaline, and a hematite. And all 3 of these are black. They really are. But this has a very green tone to it. This has, I'm going to call this kind of a neutral, maybe. And this has almost a brownish tone to it. So even though they are all black and it's, excuse me, I have got not exactly hiccups, but not exactly burps either going on. But anyway, there's so much going on with black. If I ever build up enough different colors of black, maybe I should just do a all black picture and just show that off, just how far you can go with just the color black. Maybe I'll even be funny and give it a pun name, Black of Night or Black Forest or something of that nature, so that everyone's like, what? While they realize that, yeah, this is really all just gray. Black shades of gray. Because absolute black is not something that you usually see in nature in any form or form. I mean, the sky looks black. But if you really wanted to get picky about it, Payne's Gray is probably a lot closer to a black sky when it's totally saturated than actual black is. Go ahead, try it sometime. Get you a piece of, say, black construction paper, an actual piece of black construction paper, not one that's gotten faded out or something like that. Take it out and hold it up to the night sky and see if you can find a difference. Maybe you won't be able to, maybe you will. It probably is going to depend somewhat on where you are. If you've got some place with a lot of light pollution, that is naturally going to change things. If you live out in the countryside with a lot of stars, you may not really see much in the way of blackness in the sky. I have seen pictures of places out in, say, Wyoming, Montana, deep set Alaska. And I'm not just referring to having the aurora borealis in the way. But the sky itself, I don't think that they're color shopped photo of the skies. They may be, but If they aren't, some of those pictures have turquoise, purple, just outstanding color, especially the Milky Way, where it's getting color from stars and comets and reflecting off of other moons and other gaseous bodies like nebulas, and just the range of color in a night sky where you're not having to fight light pollution is incredible. Maybe someday I'll get to go out west someplace like that and see it in person. I mean, we see a lot of stars where we are. You can see quite a bit, but when you see places that truly don't have people, but like maybe once every 100 miles, yeah, it is intense. Beautifully intense. I can't say I'm a widely traveled person. I have been places. I've even been overseas once. And it was an interesting experience because I went all the way to India. For those that don't know where I went, I saw bazaars, we went up to mountains, we saw oceans. I looked around quite a bit, in fact. It was quite an experience, and aside from how similar some of it was, the contrasts were also very interesting. For instance, there were just so many more people. I mean, anybody who goes to the next town over from where I live, where I think there might be 30,000 people, maybe. And in contrast to the places I went in India, like Mumbai, holy cow, you'll find 30,000 people just sitting on the street doing nothing because they have no jobs today. I mean, just insane people. You've been to Little Rock, Arkansas, you can just take Little Rock and compound the number of people by, I don't know, 10 times. You can't move without seeing people. I was actually surprised that no one tried to pick my pocket. Although I was also really paranoid about that, so maybe people figured I would notice. Especially since I'm not somebody who likes a lot of people up close to me most of the time anyway, so just having that many people just made me a little nervous. Even if they were being completely benign, I don't like that many people around me. But the other thing that stood out about India, at least, was the smell. And I'm not talking about a bad smell. I'm talking about just the air of the place. I've read travel logs about people talking about how they'll get up to places like India or some places in the Orients where they have really spicy foods. And I'm not even talking about hot spice. I'm just talking about like coriander, a heavy use of coriander or garlic or whatever it happens to be for the area. And it's everywhere. It's its own smell. I mean, even today, if I go to an import store where they've gotten things from India, you can smell a little bit of a different smell to it. It's got its own smell. And it's a very spicy smell. I think it's mostly the coriander. I couldn't say for sure. Probably even spices that I couldn't identify because I never used them or bought them, or just didn't even know their names. What do you think? Draw that darkness up a little bit more. Otherwise, it looks like I've got this mist coming off of this. I think I will. But yeah, it was an experience, and like I said, the smell of the place just kind of lingers in the memory. Sort of like a taste that lingers on the tongue, but this is a smell lingering in the memory. Would I ever go back? I don't know. With today's political climate, I'd be a little bit more leery, because literally this was before 9/11. And while I didn't have any problems there, in fact, most people were like, ooh, wow, a white person, because it was kind of surprising the number of them that apparently had never seen white people. And the people I was staying with, because no, I didn't just go there alone. I went and stayed with people. We went to a dress shop that they hadn't really been to before, and apparently the shopkeeper was making fun of my English chattering. Personally, I wouldn't have minded that very much, but apparently this offended them, and they said we're leaving. But it is very different being from a place where the only other language we really hear out here is Spanish, and most of those people either speak English, at least badly, or speak it, fairly decently. A lot of them live and work here, so they have to be able to speak to their employers, who are predominantly white, usually males and all that. Although we have gotten quite a few of the Indians lately. They're kind of taking over the gas stations now. They used to own all the hotels, now they're taking over the gas stations. I don't mind. It doesn't change the price of gas. Or maybe it does. Who knows? I'm not into politics. Maybe it does change the price of gas. Who owns the stations themselves? Although the prices seem to be awful everywhere I look, so I guess it really doesn't. Doesn't make any difference to me anyhow. I'm still going to buy the gas because I'm not going to walk for 4 hours to the grocery store. You hear all these guys going on about cars and pollution and everything else, and most of these people live in cities and have no concept of the rest of us who can't walk to work in a reasonable time and who really don't want to live in cities. Because believe me, if we live in countries out here, it's because we don't want to live in cities. Maybe we'd make more money out there, but then you have to put up with cities' problems. You have to put up with pollution. You have to put up with people. You have to put up with the prices of housing and food, and those things aren't real great out here, but they are a lot better than what I hear about in cities. $1,000 for a tiny apartment. Maybe we're spending $1,000 for a trailer for a month out here, but it's still got twice the room. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Let's leave that alone for now. Let it fully dry. And move on to those hibiscus. Let's go ahead and stick with this Master's Touch brush. It just seems to make sense. And don't worry about the green. This is the green from the last time, and it's perfectly dry. It's not going to hurt anything. So let's do some hibiscus negative painting for these hibiscus. After the coffee. And it looks like the cheap phthalo green I had over here is back to being moist. So let's start using that stuff up. Get some water on it so that I've actually got some paint instead of just a wet brick. And here we go. Let's get that other color working. Get around that leaf. Anybody who's wondering, this is cotton paper. In case you've not seen any of the other parts of this, this is cotton paper. I believe it's by Art and Fly. 99% sure I got it from Amazon. Quite a bit of my paper comes from there. And I've got several different kinds of paper, because even though I've been painting for a few years, I like getting new things to try out. Especially new things that are economical. A lot of people will absolutely swear by Arches. Personally, I have tried a few brands, including Arches, and I really don't understand why they're so expensive. I just really don't understand why they're expensive when there are cheaper options out there that are just as good. I have found no reason to say that Arches is number one, absolutely gotta have paper. It's cotton. I've had both the hot press, cold press. I absolutely refuse to pay $80 for their block. That was insane. Yeah, $80 for a block. And it's just a little bit more glue. So, no, sorry. This isn't a true block. It's open on both ends. And unfortunately, this is a mark against this paper, which is why we're using it for practice. Because it, like most blocks, it still buckles a little bit. And because it's open on both ends, paint tends to want to go towards the center or off to the two sides that are actually glued. So it is a mark against this paper. I probably will not buy this one again. If I wanted to take it off of this, you know, just remove the glue on both sides and paint with it as regular paper, go ahead and stretch it and all that. Yeah, sure. But again, there are other options available that are just as economically priced. I think this was a $20 pad. And I just don't see any reason to pay for less convenience. So, sorry Art and Fly, this one didn't fly. Not with me anyway. I'm sure they make plenty of sales on it anyway, so I'm sure they won't care. As far as actual performance, it's not bad. I'm not having a lot of problem with pilling. I'm not having a lot of overwork problems, you know, having so much water on it that it just falls apart. It's not tissue paper. You get it wet, it soaks it up. Put paint on it, it says, yeah, okay, let's do this. Maybe it doesn't, I mean, it's not acting like pulp paper where the paint would literally just sit on top of it. But it's not acting quite as spongy as brands like, say, Fluid 100. And yes, I have and really like Fluid 100. I use it quite a bit. It is spongy, is the only way I can describe it. It takes that paint, it takes that water, and it just sucks it up like a sponge. The biggest drawback for Fluid 100 is how soft it is. What do I mean by that? I mean, if you use a lot of masking fluid, I really don't, so it doesn't bother me. But if you use things like masking fluid or tend to use masking tapes on your paintings, put it in places where you don't plan to paint again. Because even though you might get the paint or the the fluid or the I cannot talk all of a sudden. The fluid or the tape off your page without noticeably tearing it, it pulls at the fibers. It pulls them up so that when you go back to paint, you get unexpected effects. Maybe one of these days I'll get a little scrap piece out, maybe an edge I've done off a bookmark or something, and I'll show you what I mean by that. But most of you have probably seen velour, you know, that soft, velvety fabric. I need more coffee. I can't even talk. I apparently need more coffee. But anyway, yeah, you've probably all seen velvety type fabrics. If you press down on them or rub them side to side, usually they will smooth out. But if you take a piece of, say, tape or something and just start setting it down, pulling it up, it pulls all those soft, fuzzy fibers up into the air. That's what I'm talking about. That's what that paper does when you're using masking fluids or tapes. Because while it is wonderful paper, it's soft. It's soft, but not destroying. Doesn't get destroyed real easy. You can sit there and you can layer and layer and layer and layer. I wouldn't recommend scrubbing it. You know, taking a rougher brush and scrubbing a bit off of it. I wouldn't recommend that. It is soft. You'll dig a hole in your paper real fast. Okay, here is our problem child, because I went ahead and did that background last time, and it has removed the majority of my marks. I can barely see them. Fortunately, the colors I'm using don't really make a difference, so I'm just going to go back and try to reestablish some of those lines I had on here that I can still see. Looks like I've got a little bit of a stem coming here. Looks like I've got a hole here. Another one there. I can see another lily pad off to the side and top here. I can see a little edge of this one. I can see where this one came out. It looks like I probably planned for a little chigger bite there, so let's go ahead and put that on. This is overlapping with this one. That's right, because I wanted to practice the lighting from these overlapping leaves. I can see this stem right here. I can see another little leaf coming off from here. And they're overlapping, so we're going to have to do these one by one in order to have that light gap. Let's see, this is a smaller one, but this one apparently was going over it. So let's go ahead and reline that, because that would be in the foreground or in the front. That one apparently was meant to go behind. Looks like it curves back around. Now the ones I had picked out for the regular painting, the major work, all kind of have this reddish cast to the stems, kind of a maroon or burgundy. So while I put these guidelines down, I had some grass going on down here, I should think about what color I want to do that in. Kind of a maroon color. I've got a couple of different ones I could pick from. I've got a burnt quinacridone scarlet. I've got a deep red. Or I could just use some of this leftover garbage I've got over here from cheaper brands that I just said, ugh, I am not keeping this in my main palette anymore. Take it off my palette. But because let's face it, I'm cheap. I make pennies squeak when I go shopping, and I resent having to buy things if I don't have to. I mean, somebody said something about going swimming the other day, and I was like, okay. And secretly inside, I'm thinking to myself, I don't own a swimsuit. They want to go to a pool. I don't even own a swimsuit. What am I going to do? Well, what'd you do last time? I wore a pair of jogging shorts with a tank top and an old bra. It's like, I guess I really should go swimsuit shopping. And then I go looking at swimsuits, and I hate everything they're selling. It's like, well, now I know why I don't own a swimsuit, but I still have to do something about it. Anyway, that's good enough. Yeah. Numerous reasons why I don't own a swimsuit. Not just because I couldn't afford to get one, but because I hate everything I see when I go looking at them. There's always too much exposed here or there, or that's not going to cover up some flaw I don't want to show off. And other people might say, oh, who cares? You're going swimming. Just let it all out. No, thank you. I've been to the beach. I've seen other people swimming. I don't want to see that, and I don't want other people seeing it on me. It's like, I know it's not the 1920s, folks, but some things should be covered up. Okay. These, I want to do yellow, sort of a yellow-green, and the red. I think I'm going to go ahead and go with that color that Arteza simply calls deep red, partially because I want to use it up, And then I'm probably going to replace its place with the quinacridone burnt red. But I want to use up the other one first. So, the leaves themselves were quite yellowy green. And I really, really, really love this sepia green. I know it's unpredictable and has kind of a brownish overtone, but I think that's perfect for this. I think there probably is going to be a little bit of a gap, and then we're going to have more leaf too. So let's go ahead and do that. I didn't draw that part on, but that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and put it on there. And we'll start with that layer, because this is underneath. Maybe that's the wrong way to go about it. Hey, that's why we practice. We'll find out if it was the wrong way to go about it. Go. And what I want to do is going to be a bit of a wet on wet. So I want to take the stem. I'm going to go ahead and get the green. And I'm going to go ahead and do the green on the stem. But then I'm going to get the red when I get closer to the bottom, and I'm going to start that red at the bottom, and I will drag it upwards. And you'll see what I mean when I get there if you can't quite picture what I'm talking about. But I want to start off with that green because I want it to be the predominant flavor going on the stem up there and coming most of the way down. Down we go. Okay, now I'm going to go over there and get that red and start it at the bottom and work it up into that green. And I'm just going to drag it up into that green until it kind of fades out. There we go, liking that. I think that's enough. Maybe a little bit more. Let's do a little bit more. Let's do a little bit more. Because I want it to contrast, because we're going to have a slightly bluer green with the grass. Because if we look at pond pictures and stuff, most of what you see down there is going to be the same basic shade of algae. Which is fine. It's fine for it to be the same basic shade of algae, but we're making something visually pretty here. And that's important. If you're doing something visually pretty, you kind of need to make your elements stand out. And speaking of elements that stand out, I didn't put these gills on. Yeah, it feels dry enough. Okay. After that, I think I do want a warmer gray. I'm thinking I might actually use the sepia. Yeah, I think so, because that's kind of a grayish brown, maybe a cool brown. I'm not quite sure how people want to call that. And I'm going to get this number 4 Princeton here because I want that sharp line that particular one gets me. I don't think everyone does get that sharp line because I've gone looking and some of them are almost rounded, actually rounded. I think I'm going to turn this sideways because of the angle I need. Make sure that we're good enough. Okay, let's see. The things are going to be darker on bottom, I hope. So let's just get some of that brown down there so that we can get the impression that we've got gills showing. Maybe it should be yellow. I don't remember looking at the gills on those mushrooms that I saw this color scheme on very closely. My bad. Maybe it should be yellow. I don't know. But I'm just going to go with that. I think that looks good. There we go. And that'll be 2 of these finished. Although now that I'm looking at it, I feel like those caps probably should be a little darker. That's why we practice. Anyway, back to being upright. Okay, now this is the part of being negative in painting that is a good thing. Most people say, don't be negative. In this case, we're being negative, and we intend to. So, let's use that same watercolor pencil. Calling it pencil brush now. And let's draw in a few more of those leaves. Just sort of randomly sticking out here and there. Because we are going to do the same thing again with that negative painting. Oh, because we're going to get that brush back. That big old number 12. And even though I'm saying these numbers, they only really apply to the brushes I'm using. This Master Touch or that Princton. Because not unlike women's clothing, the size isn't really that regulated. One brand's number 12 might be another brand's 16. You just really never really know. So all you can really do is either bring your brushes with you to compare with, or just buy a range of brushes and hope for the best. Or just pick a brand you like and stick with it. If you do that, then you're pretty much guaranteed to get what you expect to get every time. If you're still sort of like me and you like to experiment with brands and different things like that, then you're probably going to find a few surprises in the size aisles. Oh, well, I just bought this silver 6 over there, and it's not the same size as this, whatever brand this is, number 6. It's almost twice the size, or maybe it's a third the size. You're really just not going to know. Because they really do. They like to come up with their own ideas of what a size should be. Or like shoes. There's a reason everybody tries on their shoes when they buy them. Size 6 narrow or 8 wide. I have noticed that there's really not much in the way of wide in available shoes anymore. I think it's because they're all being made by these beautiful little elf-like Asians whose idea of fat is the American idea of average right now. It's like, oh yeah, you want one of their dresses? Okay, you wear this like size 12? Well, you better buy a 2X then. Because that's what it's going to take to wear their dress. Not as regulated as we could wish. And brushes are like that. I haven't really noticed it being that bad, and I'm perfectly happy to work with a brush that isn't the size that I thought it would be. I simply line them up by size and not by numbers. They all have numbers. Well, most of them do. Some don't even bother giving them numbers. Really cheap brands don't bother putting numbers on them. But the majority put numbers on them, and I just take those numbers with a grain of salt, compare them to the rest, and because I'm a neat freak, all of my brushes are actually lined up over there by number. Mostly because they're all the same brands. But if I got one that was drastically different in size compared to number, compared to what I have over there already, I would just ignore the number and just line it up over there according to how I view the size. Is it bigger than this one? Okay. Is it smaller than that one? Yeah. Alright, we'll just stick this brush between those two and call it good. And granted, I have a couple of odd brushes over there. I have one over here that is by Creative Mark. I think it came out of some set or other. Let's see, is it Creative Mark? That's actually supposed to be by Mimic Kolinsky. I don't think so. I think it's a knockoff because I am totally unimpressed with the quality of that brush. And from what I've been given to understand, I was expecting better from Mimic Kolinsky. So I think it's a knockoff. And it's supposed to be a liner brush, but it looks like somebody took a liner brush and just nipped the tip and put a square edge on the end of the tip. I am thoroughly unimpressed, and I'm glad I didn't pay a ton of money for it. Another reason I think it's probably a knockoff. There we go. And we'll let that background dry. That pond scene is probably dry enough to put another layer on, so reshape the brush, put that big boy back up. And what was I using? I think I was still using the 6. Okay, and I'm using my Serpentine Genuine that I'm just absolutely in love with. See, that big one is going to be on top, and probably should have been done before that one. So I'm going to go ahead and do that one, even though I've obviously got way too much paint on the brush for this small piece, but that's okay. I get it on here, and I can use my brush to just sort of sop it up like a mop, and I'll move it over to the other side of the stem and start pushing it around. Get it over there. And work around those holes I put in it. Another thing about this paper, I think the sizing might be a little uneven, because I've got a few spots like there. I've got one that's hiding under this tail, another one over there, and of course along the edges, but you know, these edges are just open, so they're going to soak stuff up in strange ways. Nothing I could confirm, but it just, and it may even be that I at some point got greasy fingers on it or something, who knows, but something about it just doesn't feel as smooth as some of the other papers I've had. I don't know, there's just something about it that doesn't feel quite up to par with some of the others I've bought. It's not terrible paper. I suppose if I wanted to get a reasonably good and yet not terribly expensive paper for my budding artist, I probably would do that. Give them a feel for cotton paper at least. And then when they start complaining about different aspects of the paper, then I'd have to up the game a little bit and get them some better paper. Yeah, I guess that does kind of look like it's overlapped a bit. Not as much as I'd hoped. I can always go back in here and darken that area just a tad. But now let's see if I can do that stem. I'm going to start just a little bit south of that top part there. This is an older stem, so it should be a bit darker. But I don't want to fade off too much like it's going to do right there. And I guess that's going to be okay. I can come back and fix it later. It's an older leaf, so it's going to be a little darker and smudgy. Why? Because the painter was feeling impatient, and I wanted to just get on with it. It's like this green here is coming down quite a bit further, but that'll be okay. So now I'm going to reach up there and get a hold of that deep red. And get that deep red started at the bottom and start pulling it up so that it can blend in with that green. And that'll do. And I'm going to let that dry because I was impatient. I think I will smooth that out a little bit. It's a little bit too dark. Smear that a little bit. There we go. Alrighty. That still looks pretty wet over here. This I really feel like we could be done with. Oh, we can go ahead and pull the tape off that end. Not that that's going to be much trouble since it's barely hanging on as it is. Boop. But yeah, you can see what this has done with the tape because it refuses to stick down. It's gone to places where the paint wasn't being stopped from moving, and it's moved right in. But that's okay. If I want to, I can just trim off all the white and just leave the edges. And I might with the pond, just kind of even that up some and save the white for the others. But we're pretty close to an hour. In fact, I think we may have just hit it. So I'm going to go ahead and let everything dry for the week, and we will come back to this and finish up later. In the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed listening to me ramble on and enjoyed watching me paint. So, this is Sharon Alexander for Alexander Arts, signing off.